What happens when you mistake vulnerability for weakness? At 30,000 feet, the line between civility and chaos is razor thin. For Victoria Thornton, a passenger in first class, the child in seat 1A was an inconvenience, an anomaly, someone who didn't belong. She saw a sick little boy and decided to make a stand, stealing his seat with a sneer and a spill. What she didn't see was that this wasn't just any seat. Seat 1A was a lifeline. A carefully coordinated medical arrangement approved by the FAA, positioned near the emergency exit, close to handheld oxygen support, and easily accessible for the medical team traveling with a child whose heart could stop at any moment. Victoria thought she was just moving a kid to make room for herself. She had no idea she was about to trigger a federal medical protocol, get herself dragged off by security, face criminal charges for endangering a minor, and learn a brutal lesson in karma, all live-streamed for the world to see. This isn't just a story about a stolen seat. It's about what happens when assumptions crash into reality. The air in the first-class cabin of Atlantic Continental Flight 1247 was already thick with that distinct pressurized scent, a mixture of recycled air, industrial-strength carpet cleaner, and the faint, expensive perfume of the passenger in 2C. In seat 1A, by the window, sat a small figure that seemed almost swallowed by the oversized leather seat. 10-year-old Ethan Mitchell, his face pale, but his eyes bright and curious, was carefully positioned in what the airline's medical protocol designated as a priority medical seat. Ethan was born with a congenital heart defect, a condition that had defined every moment of his young life. Flying wasn't a luxury for him. It was a necessity. Every few months, he had to travel cross-country for specialized treatment at the Cleveland Clinic, and every flight required precise medical coordination that most passengers would never imagine. Seat 1A wasn't assigned to Ethan because his family was wealthy. It was assigned because the FAA had approved it for medical reasons. That specific seat was positioned near the emergency exit for rapid evacuation if needed, close to the cabin's handheld emergency oxygen supply, and allowed direct line-of-sight access for Dr. Sarah Palmer, the pediatric cardiologist who was escorting him on this journey. Dr. Palmer had coordinated everything weeks in advance. The airline had confirmed the arrangement 3 times. The gate agents had been briefed. This was not a privilege or a perk. It was a medical necessity that could mean the difference between life and death. Ethan was dressed in comfortable clothes, a soft hoodie and well-worn jeans. To the untrained eye, he looked like any other kid, maybe a little pale, maybe a little thin, but nothing that screamed medical emergency waiting to happen. That was both a blessing and a curse. He had settled into his seat and was looking out the window at the ground crew loading luggage, fascinated by the choreography of airport operations, when the fragile piece of boarding was shattered. "Richard, honestly, the lounge was just filthy, and now this." The voice was like shattered glass, sharp, entitled, and designed to be heard by everyone within earshot. Ethan glanced up from the window. A woman dripping in a cream-colored cashmere blazer that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent was standing in the aisle, blocking all traffic behind her. Diamonds glittered on her fingers and ears. Her makeup was flawless, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, and her expression was one of perpetual dissatisfaction with the universe for not arranging itself more conveniently around her needs. This was Victoria Thornton. Her husband, Richard, a man with a soft body, an expensive watch, and the weary expression of someone who had long ago stopped trying to moderate his wife's behavior, nudged her from behind. "Victoria, just sit down. You're in 1B, he grumbled, gesturing to the aisle seat next to Ethan. Victoria Thornton's eyes, small, sharp, and constantly assessing the world for threats to her comfort, landed on Ethan. They scanned him from his worn sneakers to his pale, thin face, and a faint, unmistakable sneer settled on her lips. She looked at Ethan, then at the seat number above him, then back at Ethan, Her face contorted as if a computational error was occurring in her brain, as if the universe had presented her with an equation that simply did not compute. "Oh, no," Victoria said, loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. "This won't do. This won't do at all. A child? In first class? In the window seat?" Ethan shrank back slightly, his eyes widening. He had encountered adults like this before. Adults who looked at him and saw only an inconvenience, an obstacle, a thing to be moved. A young flight attendant named Lucas, fresh out of training with a flush of panic already spreading across his face, hurried over. "Ma'am, is there a problem?" Victoria pointedly ignored Ethan, as if he were a piece of misplaced luggage rather than a human being. She clicked her fingers at Lucas, actually clicked her fingers like she was summoning a servant. "Excuse me. I believe there's been a mistake. My husband and I are seated here, but this child is in the window seat. I need the window seat. I always have the window seat. Children don't need first class. Surely he can be moved to the back where there's more supervision." Lucas checked his manifest, his hands trembling slightly under Victoria's withering gaze. "Ma'am, your ticket is for 1B, the aisle seat. This passenger," he gestured to Ethan, "is correctly seated in 1A. It's actually a medically assigned seat." "Medically assigned?" Victoria's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Oh, please! He looks perfectly fine to me. What, does he get motion sickness? Does he need extra leg room for his video games? I'm telling you, this is completely unacceptable. People like, well, we prefer the window. The child can move." The implication hung in the air, ugly and unmistakable. People like us. People who matter. People who belong here. Dr. Sarah Palmer, who had been storing her medical bag in the overhead bin 2 rows back, pushed forward through the crowded aisle. She was a tall woman in her 40s, with kind eyes that could turn to steel in an instant when her patients were threatened. "Excuse me, I'm Dr. Sarah Palmer. I'm this child's medical escort. He has a congenital heart condition that requires specific seating accommodations. This seat assignment was coordinated with your airline weeks ago and approved by the FAA. He cannot be moved." Victoria's eyes narrowed into slits. She looked at the doctor, at her sensible clothes and lack of designer labels, and clearly dismissed her as someone beneath her notice. "A heart condition?" Victoria's voice dripped with theatrical skepticism. "Oh, how convenient. Children fake being sick all the time for attention. Everyone knows that. If he were actually that sick, he'd be in a hospital bed, not gallivanting around on airplanes. This is obviously just a scam to get premium seating." Dr. Palmer's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I am a board-certified pediatric cardiologist at Johns Hopkins. This child has long QT syndrome, which means his heart rhythm can become fatally unstable under stress. This seating arrangement is not a luxury. It is a medical necessity. I need you to take your assigned seat." Victoria waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away an annoying insect. "I don't care if you're the Surgeon General. I want the window seat. This child needs to move." Richard Thornton, sensing that this was escalating beyond even his considerable tolerance for his wife's behavior, put a hand on her arm. "Victoria, maybe we should just—" "Don't you start," she snapped at him. "I will not be lectured by hired help, and I will not sit in an aisle seat like some kind of commoner." Lucas, the young flight attendant, was frozen. His training had covered medical emergencies. His training had covered unruly passengers. But it had not covered this. The intersection of entitlement and cruelty, the moment when a wealthy passenger decides that a sick child is simply an obstacle to be removed. He didn't know what to do. He was terrified of making a scene, terrified of offending someone who clearly had money and connections, terrified of everything except the one thing he should have been focused on, protecting the vulnerable child in his care. And then Victoria made her move. "Fine," she hissed through clenched teeth. She unclipped the top of her designer water bottle, a sleek, expensive thing that probably cost more than Ethan's entire outfit. And then, with a theatrical gasp of, "Oh, whoops," she deliberately tipped it forward. A cascade of alkaline water poured directly onto the plush upholstery of seat 1A, soaking the cushion and splashing across Ethan's left side. Ethan gasped, flinching back from the cold shock of the water. His eyes went wide with confusion and fear. Victoria feigned a moment of exaggerated shock, her hand flying to her chest. "Oh my goodness, look at that! The seat is absolutely soaked! How awful!" Her voice was loud, performative, designed to create a narrative. "Well, the child certainly can't sit there now. The seat is ruined. Lucas, this passenger needs a new seat. This one is simply unusable." Before Dr. Palmer or Lucas could react, before anyone could process what was happening, Victoria Thornton did the unforgivable. She reached down, grabbed Ethan by the shoulders, and shoved. A 10-year-old boy with a failing heart tumbled out of his seat and into the aisle. The sound he made when he hit the floor, a small, frightened cry of pain and confusion, cut through the cabin like a knife. Victoria slid into the now partially dry portion of seat 1A, pushing her body against the window with a satisfied smile. She buckled the seatbelt with a decisive click. "There," she announced, adjusting her blazer and settling in as if she had just completed a particularly satisfying business negotiation. "I'll just sit here out of the way. Much better. Richard, you take my seat. The child can go find somewhere else to be. Coach, probably. That's more appropriate for his kind." The other first-class passengers were staring, some in horror, some in disbelief. Several were already reaching for their phones. This was no longer a microaggression or an awkward seating dispute. This was a hostile takeover. This was assault. Lucas stood in the aisle, his mouth hanging open, utterly paralyzed. He had no idea what to do. His training had failed him. His courage had failed him. He had just watched a child be assaulted and done absolutely nothing. Dr. Palmer was already on her knees beside Ethan, who was lying in the aisle, his small body curled slightly, his breathing rapid and shallow. "Ethan, Ethan, look at me. Can you hear me? How do you feel?" The boy's face had gone from pale to ashen gray. His eyes were unfocused, and his hand was pressed against his chest. "My chest feels funny, Dr. Palmer," he whispered. "It's beating really fast and weird." Dr. Palmer's blood ran cold. She pressed her fingers to his wrist, feeling for his pulse. It was erratic, irregular, racing and stumbling like a car engine about to stall. The stress of the confrontation, the shock of the cold water, the trauma of being physically thrown from his seat. It was triggering an arrhythmic episode. For a child with long QT syndrome, an arrhythmic episode wasn't just uncomfortable, it was potentially fatal. Victoria Thornton, now comfortably ensconced in the stolen seat, pulled out a compact mirror and began reapplying her lipstick. She glanced down at the scene in the aisle, the crumpled child, the frantic doctor, and rolled her eyes. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "He's obviously faking it. Children are such drama queens these days. Everyone wants attention. If he's that weak and sickly, he should have stayed home. Let the adults have some peace." This was the moment the audience understands the true horror of what has happened. This child wasn't just insulted, he wasn't just pushed. He was in real, immediate, life-threatening danger, and the woman who put him there was sitting in his medically assigned seat, fixing her makeup, utterly unconcerned with whether he lived or died. Dr. Sarah Palmer didn't hesitate. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. Her voice, calm but carrying the absolute weight of medical authority, cut through the cabin like a surgical blade. "I am activating the passenger medical protection protocol. This child is experiencing a cardiac event. I need the cabin crew to contact the captain immediately. This aircraft is not to move. We need airport medical response on standby. Now." The Passenger Medical Protection Protocol is a real federal aviation regulation designed for exactly these situations. When a qualified medical professional invokes it, the protocol requires immediate action. The aircraft must hold position. Airport medical personnel must be summoned to the gate. Security must be notified of any passenger causing obstruction to medical care, and the flight crew has the authority, indeed the obligation, to remove any passenger interfering with a medical emergency. Lucas, the young flight attendant, finally snapped out of his paralysis. The words medical emergency and contact the captain had penetrated his panic. This was something he knew. This was protocol. He reached for the intercom with trembling hands. A senior flight attendant, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca with 20 years of experience and absolutely no tolerance for nonsense, burst through the curtain from the galley. She took one look at the scene, the child on the floor, the doctor, Victoria Thornton lounging in 1A like a queen on a stolen throne, and her face hardened into granite. "Lucas, step back. I've got this." She reached for the intercom. "Captain Morrison, we have a medical emergency in the first-class cabin. A minor is in cardiac distress. We need airport medical response at the gate immediately. Do not repeat. Do not clear for pushback." Victoria scoffed from her stolen seat. "This is absolutely ridiculous. There is no emergency. The child is faking. He just wants attention. I'm the victim here. I'm the one who had to deal with being assigned a seat next to a sick child." Rebecca turned to Victoria, and her eyes were ice. "Ma'am, I need you to get out of that seat immediately." "I will not," Victoria sniffed. "I'm settled. I'm comfortable. And I'm not going to be bullied by airline employees and some so-called doctor making up diseases." "Ma'am." Rebecca's voice was different now. It was the voice of someone who had seen everything, who had dealt with drunk passengers and belligerent businessmen and would-be terrorists, and who was not about to be intimidated by a woman in a cashmere blazer. "You don't understand. The captain has been notified. Security has been notified. You are interfering with a medical emergency and obstructing a federally mandated accommodation. You can get out of that seat voluntarily or you can be removed. Your choice." From the cockpit, the PA system crackled to life. Captain James Morrison's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Morrison. We have received a medical emergency notification and are holding at the gate. Airport medical personnel are en route. I need all passengers to remain calm and, for those in first class, to follow all crew instructions immediately and without question. We appreciate your patience." The PA clicked off. There was a moment of heavy silence in the cabin. Then a new sound, the heavy thunk-thunk-thunk of the jet bridge reconnecting to the aircraft, the hydraulic hiss of the main cabin door opening. 3 people entered. They were not passengers. 2 were airport security officers in crisp uniforms, their faces professionally neutral, but their eyes already scanning the scene and cataloging everything. The 3rd was a paramedic with a rolling medical kit. The lead security officer, a solid man with a shaved head and a name tag reading Officer Davis, spoke first. "Where is the child?" Dr. Palmer looked up from where she was still kneeling beside Ethan. "Here. He's experiencing arrhythmia secondary to acute stress. He needs to be back in his assigned seat with oxygen support and complete calm. But that woman," she pointed at Victoria, "assaulted him and stole his seat." Officer Davis's eyes moved to Victoria Thornton. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step out of that seat." "I absolutely will not," Victoria said, but her voice had lost some of its imperious edge. The presence of uniformed officers was beginning to penetrate her bubble of entitlement. "Do you know who I am? My husband is Richard Thornton of Thornton Wealth Management. We are platinum members of this airline. This child is clearly faking his illness to get attention and better seating, and I refuse to be victimized by this scam." Officer Davis's expression didn't change. He pulled out a tablet and tapped a few commands. "Ma'am, I'm reviewing the cabin camera footage right now." The color began to drain from Victoria's face. I see you deliberately pouring water on this seat. I see you placing your hands on a minor. I see you pushing him out of his seat onto the floor." Officer Davis looked up from the tablet, and his eyes were flat and hard. "Under federal law, that's interference with a flight crew, assault on a minor, and given his medical condition, which was documented with the airline, it's also reckless endangerment of a child. You're looking at federal charges, ma'am." "She pushed me!" Victoria shrieked, pointing at Ethan. "That child attacked me first!" "Ma'am." Officer Davis's voice was patient but implacable. "The video clearly shows a 10-year-old boy sitting quietly in his seat looking out the window. At no point did he move toward you, touch you, or speak to you. You initiated all physical contact. Now, I'm going to ask you one more time. Please step out of that seat and come with me. You can do this voluntarily, or my partner and I can assist you. Your choice." The entire first-class cabin was watching. Every single passenger had their phone out now. A tech executive in 3A was live streaming to his 500,000 followers. A journalist in 2B was taking notes on her phone with professional speed. Victoria looked around and saw a wall of glowing screens, all pointed at her face. The reality of her situation finally, fully penetrated her consciousness. She wasn't just causing a scene. She had committed crimes, on camera, and the whole world was about to watch. "Richard!" she screamed at her husband, who was standing in the aisle with the expression of a man watching a slow-motion car crash. "Do something! Call our lawyer! This is outrageous!" Richard Thornton said nothing. He just stared at his wife as if seeing her clearly for the first time in their 23-year marriage. "Ma'am," Officer Davis took a step forward. "Last chance, voluntarily or with assistance." Victoria Thornton unbuckled her seatbelt. Her hands were shaking. Her face had gone from imperious to ashen. She stood on unsteady legs. "This is wrong," she said, but her voice had shrunk to something small and frightened. "This is all wrong. I'm the victim here. That child—" "Ma'am, please stop talking." Officer Davis gestured toward the exit. "Let's go." Victoria Thornton walked down the aisle of that first-class cabin, flanked by 2 security officers. She passed rows of passengers who stared at her with undisguised contempt. She passed phone cameras recording her every step. She passed flight attendants who had already written their incident reports in their heads. At the door, she paused and looked back. Dr. Palmer and the paramedics were carefully lifting Ethan back into seat 1A. The boy was pale and frightened, but he was being cared for. He was being protected. No one was protecting Victoria Thornton. The cameras followed her all the way off the plane. In the gate area, the situation escalated rapidly. Officer Davis and his partner escorted Victoria and her husband to a security office adjacent to the terminal. Richard Thornton went voluntarily as a witness, though the look on his face suggested he was already calculating the cost of divorce lawyers. Back on the plane, the paramedics had stabilized Ethan. They propped him up with pillows, administered supplemental oxygen through a portable mask, and created a quiet, calm environment around seat 1A. Dr. Palmer monitored his heart rate on a portable monitor, watching the erratic rhythm slowly smooth out. "His pulse is coming down," she announced to Rebecca, the senior flight attendant. "He's stabilizing, but he needs complete quiet and no more stress. Any more excitement and we'd have to get him off the plane to a hospital." Rebecca nodded. "The captain has agreed to delay departure until he's fully stable. We're not going anywhere until you give the all-clear, doctor." The first-class cabin had fallen into a hushed, almost reverent silence. Every passenger understood now. This wasn't about a seat. This wasn't about comfort or window views or who deserved to be in first class. This was about a child's life, and a woman had nearly taken it for the sake of a window view. The passengers looked at each other with a shared understanding. They had witnessed something ugly, but they had also witnessed something important. A system that, when activated, actually worked. A child had been threatened, and the machinery of protection had ground into motion. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fast enough. But it had worked. The consequences for Victoria Thornton came swiftly. And they came not from some superhero or secret billionaire or powerful corporate executive with a kill switch. They came from the system, the rules, the laws that were designed precisely for moments like this. In the security office at the airport, Victoria was formally processed. The charges were read out with clinical precision: interference with a flight crew, assault on a minor, and reckless endangerment of a child with a known medical condition. The last charge was the most serious, a federal offense that could carry up to 2 years in prison. Victoria's attorney arrived within an hour, an expensive shark in a $3,000 suit. He conferred with his client in hushed, urgent tones. But there was only so much he could do. The video was everywhere. 30 passengers had recorded the incident from every conceivable angle. A tech blogger with 2 million followers had already posted the footage with the caption, "Watch, woman assaults child to steal his seat on flight." Within 3 hours, "Seat Stealer" was trending on every social media platform. Within 6 hours, Victoria Thornton's name and face were on national news. By the next morning, she had become the symbol of everything wrong with entitlement, privilege, and cruelty in modern America. The airline moved quickly to contain the damage. Atlantic Continental issued a statement within hours. "We are shocked and appalled by the behavior of this passenger. She has been permanently banned from all Atlantic Continental flights effective immediately. We are fully cooperating with law enforcement and the FAA investigation." Other airlines followed suit. Within the week, Victoria Thornton found herself on the no-fly list of 4 major carriers. She couldn't get on a plane if she tried. The FAA opened a formal investigation, not just into Victoria, but into the airline's training protocols. How had a situation been allowed to escalate so far before intervention? Why had a young flight attendant frozen instead of acting? The agency demanded answers. Victoria was released on bail, but the legal consequences were far from over. The district attorney, sensing public sentiment and a slam-dunk case with dozens of video witnesses, pursued the charges aggressively. Plea deal negotiations began, but the prosecutors weren't in a generous mood. The social consequences were even more devastating. Victoria and Richard Thornton had built their lives around their position in society. The charity galas, the country club memberships, the exclusive dinner parties. Within a month, all of it evaporated. Invitations stopped arriving. Friends stopped returning calls. The Thorntons became social poison. Richard filed for divorce quietly, citing irreconcilable differences. The tabloids, of course, found out anyway. Victoria's attorney eventually negotiated a plea deal: a misdemeanor conviction for assault, 2,000 hours of community service, mandatory anger management counseling, and 5 years of probation. It was the lightest possible outcome. But it was still a criminal conviction, still a permanent stain on her record, still the complete destruction of the life she had built. No one needed special powers to bring her down. No one needed to be a secret CEO or a billionaire with a legal kill switch. The system, the actual existing system of laws and regulations designed to protect the vulnerable, worked exactly as it was supposed to. Karma, it turned out, didn't need supernatural intervention. It just needed witnesses and cameras and a society that had finally decided that enough was enough. Back on Flight 1247, the immediate crisis had passed. 20 minutes after Victoria was escorted off the plane, Dr. Palmer gave the all-clear. Ethan's heart rate had stabilized. His color was returning. The arrhythmic episode had passed without permanent damage. Captain James Morrison emerged from the cockpit. He was a veteran pilot with silver hair and 30 years of experience, a man who had seen everything that could happen at 30,000 feet. But as he walked down the aisle toward row 1, his weathered face showed something rarely seen there: emotion. He stopped at seat 1A and crouched down, bringing himself to Ethan's eye level. The boy looked up at him with tired, wary eyes. "Son," Captain Morrison said, his gruff voice unexpectedly gentle, "I want you to know something. You are the most important passenger on this flight. Not because of what happened, but because you always were. This seat, Seat 1A, belongs to you. It was assigned to you because you need it, and that makes it yours. And as long as I'm captain of this aircraft, no one, I mean no one, is ever going to take it from you. Do you understand? Ethan, still pale but breathing steadily now, managed a small, fragile smile. Thank you, Captain. Captain Morrison stood and addressed the first-class cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. We will be departing shortly. I want to thank you all for your patience during this situation, and I want to assure every passenger on this aircraft that the safety and dignity of everyone aboard is our absolute priority. Always. He paused, and his voice hardened slightly. No exceptions. A passenger in first class started clapping, then another. Within seconds, the entire cabin erupted in applause. Not the polite, obligatory applause of a smooth landing, but something more genuine. Something that said, "We saw what happened here, and we stand with the child." Then Lucas approached, the young flight attendant who had frozen, who had stood there paralyzed while a child was assaulted in front of him, who had failed in the most fundamental duty of his job, to protect the passengers in his care. His face was flushed with shame. His eyes were red-rimmed. He had clearly been crying in the galley. He knelt down beside Seat 1A, bringing himself to Ethan's eye level, just as the captain had done. "Hey, buddy," Lucas said, and his voice cracked. I need to say something to you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have protected you. That's my job. That's what I'm supposed to do. And I froze. I was scared of her. Scared of making a scene. Scared of getting in trouble. And I let her hurt you. And that's not okay. It will never be okay. I failed you. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. But I want you to know something. I'm going to do better. Next time, and there won't be a next time on my watch, but if there ever is, I'm going to protect passengers like you. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to speak up. I promise you that. I promise. Ethan looked at Lucas with the clear, uncomplicated forgiveness that only children possess. He reached out and patted Lucas's hand. "It's okay," Ethan said. "You tried. She was really scary." Lucas laughed, a wet, broken sound that was half sob. "Yeah, buddy, she really was, but not as brave as you." The airline didn't just move on, they couldn't. The FAA investigation demanded answers, and the public demanded accountability. In the weeks following the incident, Atlantic Continental launched a comprehensive overhaul of their cabin crew training. They brought in consultants, psychologists, security experts, and advocates for passengers with medical needs. They developed new protocols, new training modules, new ways of thinking about the job. They called it the Vulnerable Passenger Protection Program. And at its center was a new concept, privilege-based aggression. The term, coined by the training developers, described exactly what Lucas had experienced. The way that wealth and social status could be weaponized against the vulnerable, and the way that fear of offending powerful people could paralyze those who should be protecting the weak. The incident from Flight 1247 became the centerpiece of the training. With the Mitchell family's permission, the video footage was shown to every new hire, every veteran crew member, every gate agent, and every manager. They watched Victoria Thornton pour water on a child's seat. They watched her push him to the floor. They watched Lucas freeze, and then they learned what they should do instead. Lucas himself became one of the program's most dedicated advocates. The young man who had frozen in that moment of crisis transformed that failure into purpose. He went through the training first, asked the most questions, pushed the hardest, and when the airline asked for volunteers to help train new hires, his hand was the first one up. "I know what it feels like to fail," he told a room full of new flight attendants during one of his first training sessions. "I know what it feels like to be so afraid of causing a scene that you let a child get hurt. And I'm here to tell you, the scene is worth causing. The complaint is worth getting. Your job is not to make powerful people comfortable. Your job is to protect everyone on that plane, and especially the ones who can't protect themselves. The program spread beyond Atlantic Continental. Other airlines requested the training materials. Industry conferences featured presentations on privilege-based aggression. Academic papers were written. The FAA incorporated elements of the program into their recommended crew training guidelines. One incident, one viral video, one child who nearly died for a window seat, and an entire industry started to change. 6 months later, Ethan Mitchell was back at the airport. Another flight, another trip to Cleveland Clinic for his regular cardiac checkup, another seat assignment, 1A. But this time, everything was different. The gate agent recognized his name when he checked in. "Ethan Mitchell? We've been expecting you. Your seat is ready, and we've already briefed the cabin crew about your medical needs. Is there anything else we can do for you before boarding?" Ethan's mother, standing beside him, blinked in surprise. "No, that's wonderful. Thank you." They boarded first, as part of the airline's new priority boarding protocol for medically sensitive passengers. The lead flight attendant, a woman named Patricia with warm eyes and a genuine smile, greeted them at the door. "Welcome aboard, Ethan. I'm Patricia. I'll be taking care of you today. Your seat is right this way, and I want you to know, if you need anything at all, you just press that call button, and I'll be there in a heartbeat. Okay?" Ethan smiled. Okay. He settled into seat 1A, the same seat, the same window. But the world around it had changed. The passenger in 1B was a middle-aged businessman in a well-tailored suit. He watched Ethan settle in, noticed the medical alert bracelet on his wrist, and immediately shifted his briefcase to give the boy more room. "Hey there," the man said with a friendly smile. "I'm Tom. If you need anything during the flight, more space, help reaching something, whatever, you just let me know, okay? I've got a son about your age." Ethan looked at him, at this stranger who was offering kindness without being asked, without expecting anything in return. "Thanks," he said. "I'm Ethan." "Nice to meet you, Ethan. You want the window cracked so you can see the takeoff? Best part of flying, if you ask me." Ethan grinned, a real grin, not the cautious, defensive smile he had learned to wear around adults. "Yeah, I love watching the ground get smaller." He turned to the window as the plane began to taxi. The airport sprawled beneath him, full of movement and purpose. Somewhere out there, Victoria Thornton was serving her community service hours, banned from the skies. Her name forever attached to a viral moment of cruelty. Somewhere out there, Lucas was teaching a new class of flight attendants how to be brave. But Ethan wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about the clouds, about the window seat that was his, about the fact that for the first time in a long time, he felt safe. He felt seen. He felt like he mattered. Not because he had won anything, not because the bad lady was gone, but because finally the world had proven that it would protect him, that there were systems in place and people who cared, and a society that would rally around a sick kid who just needed to get to his doctor. The plane lifted off. The ground fell away. The clouds rushed up to meet them. And Ethan Mitchell, 10 years old, heart condition and all, smiled at the view. The seat was clean. The cabin was calm. Everything was exactly as it should be, and that was the real victory. And so, it's a real-life drama that shows us exactly what happens when entitlement meets consequence. Ethan didn't need a superhero to save him. He didn't need a secret billionaire or a CEO with the power to ground fleets. He needed the system to work. And it did. Victoria Thornton learned the hard way that the child you dismiss, the one you think you can push aside because they're small and sick and inconvenient, that child might be the one the whole world rallies behind. She thought she was moving an obstacle. She was actually revealing her own cruelty to millions of witnesses. The Harringtons lost their money and their status. Victoria Thornton lost her freedom and her reputation. But Ethan? Ethan gained something more valuable than any of them ever had. Proof that he mattered. Proof that the world would fight for him. What do you think? Was the system's response appropriate? Was it enough? Or should Victoria have faced even harsher consequences? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story and the sweet, sweet taste of karma, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another story of real-life drama and justice. Share this video with someone who needs to see what happens when you mess with the wrong kid. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.